In heterogeneous societies, the arrival of males from outsider groups into an established city, state, or geographic region initiates direct competition with native males for access to females within that receiving population. These outsider males pursue the most desirable females according to prevailing standards of beauty and attractiveness, regardless of whether the inflows include accompanying females or whether additional females migrate independently. The process generates a fundamental dichotomy between the native or majority group and the incoming or minority group, where socioeconomic, political, or other factors drive the movement of males into territory already occupied by an established mating market. Native males operate within inherited social parameters and guidelines shaped by long-standing local norms, while outsider males introduce their own distinct social frameworks, which they deploy to justify heightened interactions with local females. This deployment occurs irrespective of whether those frameworks align with the outsider's original tribal or societal structures, producing an amplified pattern of courtship that disrupts the pre-existing balance. The resulting dynamic favors outsider males in specific ways because they experience reduced constraints from the local status hierarchy and reputation systems. Unbound by the same reputational costs that govern native males, outsiders adopt bolder tactics, including direct persistence and displays of dominance that exceed the boundaries typically enforced within the host population. This creates an extra incentive for outsider males to target local females, who may be perceived as novel or higher value opportunities compared to those available in their origin groups. The competition intensifies precisely because reproduction constitutes a zero-sum resource in the immediate term. Each pairing secured by an outsider male reduces the pool available to native males. Even when inflows bring some females from the outsider group, the male-biased nature of many such movements ensures that the net effect remains competitive pressure on the majority male cohort, who must now contend with both in-group rivals and these additional external challengers. Such patterns reveal the inherent logic of sexual selection operating across group boundaries, where males from any background pursue reproductive advantage through whatever means their circumstances permit. The native population's established structures, while providing internal order, simultaneously expose its males to disadvantage when confronted with males unencumbered by those same structures. The introduction of outsider males therefore functions as an expansion of the effective mating market in a manner that systematically disadvantages the host group's males, particularly those of younger age cohorts who possess the highest immediate reproductive stakes. This foundational asymmetry sets the stage for broader disruptions in demographic stability, group cohesion, and long-term reproductive outcomes across the society. The dynamics of outsider male intrusion in local mating markets. Outsider males entering a region encounter a pre-formed mating landscape populated by females whose desirability varies along locally calibrated dimensions of attractiveness and reproductive value. These males direct their efforts disproportionately toward the higher value segments of that female pool, driven by the universal male strategy of maximizing access to fertile partners. Because the newcomers operate outside the native male's established social web, they deploy courtship behaviors calibrated to their own prior environments, which often emphasize dominance and persistence over the more restrained norms enforced among locals. The outcome is over-interaction with local females, as outsider males claim latitude to ignore or override host group etiquette without incurring the same social penalties that native males would face. This intrusion unfolds irrespective of the exact composition of accompanying migrants, as the competitive focus remains fixed on securing matings within the receiving population. Native males, by contrast, conduct their courtship within parameters shaped by lifelong immersion in the local status hierarchy and kinship networks. They compete primarily among themselves under shared roles that constrain aggression and enforce reputation-based accountability. When outsider males arrive, the native cohort finds itself simultaneously engaged in in-group rivalry and an additional layer of out-group competition that operates under different rules. The disparity arises because outsider males experience no equivalent reputational tethering to the host community, Their actions carry fewer long-term costs within the local context. Consequently, the mating market tilts toward greater success for outsiders in claiming pairings with local females, especially those who occupy positions of intermediate or lower competition within the native pool. This pattern of intrusion produces a measurable expansion of effective male density in the local operational sex ratio, even when total inflows remain modest. The additional competitors draw from the same finite female resource without contributing symmetrically to the pool of available partners, thereby reducing the statistical probability of successful pairing for every native male. The process is self-reinforcing. Successful outsider matings further signal opportunity to subsequent arrivals, perpetuating the cycle. Native males thus confront a compounded competitive environment that their evolved psychology registers as an encroachment on rightful access to in-group females, generating the precise conditions under which intergroup tension escalates through observable disparities in dating outcomes and pair formation. The demographic imperative for balanced or restricted inflows. The introduction of outsider males into an established population creates an inherent reproductive cost to the host group unless the inflows maintain strict parity between male and female migrants. When males predominate among arrivals, the local mating market experiences an artificial surplus of competitors who direct their efforts toward native females rather than confining competition to their own cohort. This imbalance logically undermines the stability of the majority population's reproductive prospects because it converts what would otherwise remain internal competition into an externally subsidized scramble. Rational group strategy therefore demands either the complete exclusion of outsider inflows or the enforcement of equal sex ratios among any permitted migrants so that newcomer males first exhaust opportunities within their own arriving population before engaging the host pool. Any deviation from this principle systematically disadvantages native males without offsetting benefits to the overall demographic structure. The mechanism operates through simple supply and demand mechanics in the mating market. A male-skewed inflow elevates the operational sex ratio above parity, intensifying short-term mating tactics, poaching of already paired or sought-after females, and status competition across group lines. Native males, already navigating in-group rivalry for the most desirable partners, now face an expanded field of rivals whose presence dilutes their bargaining power and delays or precludes pair bond formation. The host population absorbs this distortion without reciprocal gain, as the surplus males do not bring equivalent female partners to restore balance. Over time, the cumulative effect manifests in reduced marriage rates among native males, particularly those of lower status, and a corresponding shift of females toward outgroup pairings that further contracts the native reproductive pool. Maintenance of balanced ratios or outright restriction of inflows preserves the integrity of the host mating market by ensuring that any new competition arises symmetrically and remains contained. In the absence of such measures, the majority population incurs an enduring deficit in reproductive access that compounds across generations. The native male cohort inherits a progressively constricted set of opportunities, while the societal structures designed to channel courtship remain calibrated to a pre-inflow demographic reality. This demographic imperative therefore functions as the foundational requirement for any sustainable approach to intergroup contact, preventing the conversion of voluntary migration into an involuntary tax on the host group's future fertility and cohesion. Asymmetries in protective and expansive strategies between majority and minority males. Minority or immigrant males exhibit heightened protection of their own females precisely because their smaller group size elevates the per female reproductive value within the limited in-group pool. With fewer total females available, each represents a scarce resource whose loss throughout marriage threatens the group's demographic continuity at a disproportionate rate. These males therefore enforce tighter mate guarding, cultural norms of endogamy, and coordinated social controls that insulate their females from external access. Majority males encounter systematic barriers when attempting to pursue minority females, as the smaller groups, males maintain vigilant defense calibrated to the acute stakes of scarcity. The protective strategy succeeds because the minority cohort coordinates more effectively around the preservation of its reproductive capital, rendering outgroup encroachment difficult and costly. Simultaneously, the same minority males pursue expansive strategies toward the majority female population, which presents a vastly larger and more varied pool of potential partners. The abundance of majority females includes a full spectrum of attractiveness levels, with many lower competition segments rendered more accessible by the internal mating pressures already present among majority males. Minority males, operating under conditions of relative scarcity within their own group, allocate effort toward these opportunities with urgency, recognizing that their options remain constrained compared to the expansive choices available to natives. This dual posture, defensive insulation of own females paired with offensive pursuit of host females, arises directly from the numerical disparity between groups and the differing time horizons each male cohort perceives for securing matings. Majority males therefore face a structurally asymmetric contest. Their access to minority females is blocked by vigilant guarding, while their own female pool remains open to persistent encroachment from outsiders who face no equivalent internal restraint. The large size of the majority population creates an illusion of abundance that allows native males to tolerate some leakage at the margins. Yet the cumulative siphoning reduces overall pairing success and shifts the distribution of matings away from the host group. The asymmetry ensures that minority males gain reproductive ground without symmetric exposure, producing a net transfer of mating opportunities from the majority to the minority that undermines the host population's long-term demographic position. The intergenerational imperative and the perils of senior male defection. Young males within the majority population compete simultaneously against in-group peers and outsider males, yet they lack the long-term perspective necessary to recognize the full extent of demographic distortion in the mating market. Their immediate focus remains fixed on status displays and short-term courtship success, a pattern adaptive for rapid reproductive effort, but insufficient for evaluating the cumulative impact of sustained outsider inflows. Older males in the majority group possess the accumulated experience and shifted life history priorities that equip them to perceive these broader patterns, including the downstream effects of reduced native pairing rates on group continuity. It therefore constitutes their coalitional duty to regulate access to majority females, employing institutional authority and cultural norms to shield the younger cohort's reproductive prospects from external competition. This protective responsibility derives from the evolutionary shift that occurs once males pass peak reproductive age. Direct mating effort gives way to investment in kin and coalition members, particularly sons and younger male relatives who carry the group's genetic and cultural lineage forward. Senior males function as gatekeepers who maintain balanced sex ratios, enforce endogamy thresholds, and deter unchecked poaching precisely because they understand that unchecked intrusion disadvantages their own descendants. When they fulfill this role, the majority young males inherit a mating environment characterized by symmetric competition under shared rules, preserving fairness and predictability within the host population. Failure to discharge this duty transforms older males into active defectors within the coalitional game. By permitting or encouraging male-biased inflows while ignoring the resulting competitive tilt, they impose an undue burden on the very young males whose reproductive success represents the ultimate measure of their own indirect fitness. The abdication is not neutral. It systematically erodes the majority group's demographic position by allowing outsider males to siphon pairings that would otherwise remain within the host pool. Young males register the disparity through tangible experiences of fewer dates, heightened rejection, and visible poaching. Yet they lack the institutional leverage to reverse the policies enacted by the senior cohort. The resulting resentment accumulates as unchanneled frustration, eroding trust in both institutions and in-group females while delaying family formation across the native population. The costs of prioritizing abstract ideals and resulting social tension. When older males elevate abstract ideals such as diversity, economic growth, or cheap labor above the reproductive prospects of their own young males. They enact a direct defection from the coalitional obligations that sustain their society across generations. These ideals serve as rhetorical cover for policies that flood the mating market with additional male competitors, while externalizing the reproductive costs onto the younger native cohort. The senior males, insulated by age and status, no longer face personal consequences from the sex ratio imbalances they endorse. Their own reproductive careers have concluded, and their immediate descendants often enjoy protective buffers of wealth or social position. The young majority males, however, inherit a contracted mating pool where outsider persistence and different courtship norms compound existing in-group competition, producing measurable shortfalls in pairing success and lifetime fertility. This prioritization generates cascading societal problems that extend far beyond individual mating outcomes. Native young males experience the distortion in real time as reduced access to partners, increased competition for intermediate attractiveness tiers, and a pervasive sense that the local mating market has been artificially inflated by external forces. Without institutional power to correct the imbalance, the disparity festers into generalized distrust of the prevailing social order and of the very females whose choices now reflect the expanded choice set created by outsider presence. The tension builds inevitably because the competitive environment violates the implicit fairness assumptions that govern symmetric in-group rivalry, converting routine courtship into a zero-sum contest across group lines. The broader consequence is a fractured society in which the normal interplay of male-female relationships within a balanced 50-50 demographic loses its cohesion. What would otherwise remain predictable competition within a homogeneous population becomes an overt and numerical overload of outsider males whose aggressive attributes and differing norms disrupt established dynamics. Fertility shortfalls follow as fewer native pairings translate into fewer native births, while the majority population absorbs the full weight of the resulting instability. Older males who champion these abstract ideals therefore function as architects of the very social unrest they later attribute to intolerance among the young, having sacrificed coalitional integrity for short-term economic or reputational gains that never compensate for the permanent loss of reproductive access imposed on their descendants. Conclusion: intergroup male competition in mating markets, sex ratio imbalances, and group strategies. The dynamics of intergroup male competition in mating markets demonstrate that outsider male inflows, when unbalanced or unregulated, systematically disadvantage the native male population by expanding the pool of competitors without symmetric contribution to available females. This disadvantage operates through heightened intrusion, asymmetric courtship tactics, and demographic distortion that tilts pairing outcomes away from the majority cohort. The logic of sexual selection ensures that males pursue reproductive advantage across group boundaries, yet the host population bears disproportionate costs when its senior members fail to enforce protective boundaries calibrated to preserve in-group access. Group-level asymmetries further compound the effect, as minority males simultaneously guard their scarce females with heightened vigilance while expanding aggressively into the abundant majority pool. Majority males encounter blocked access on one side and open encroachment on the other, producing a net transfer of mating opportunities that contracts the host group's reproductive base. Young males within the majority register these effects most acutely, yet lack the perspective and power to counteract them, placing the burden of regulation squarely on older males whose evolved role demands exactly such coalitional defense. The abdication of that role in favor of abstract ideals constitutes the decisive failure that converts manageable competition into enduring societal tension. By defecting from their gatekeeping responsibilities, senior males engineer the precise conditions of resentment, delayed reproduction, and eroded cohesion that undermine the majority population's long-term continuity. Sustainable intergroup arrangements, therefore, require strict adherence to balanced sex ratios, restricted inflows, and unwavering senior male enforcement of protective norms. Only through such measures can societies maintain the symmetric competition and demographic integrity that allow Native males to secure the reproductive prospects essential to group persistence.